Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning Five and Change, and this is always one of my personal favorite shows. We are joined by the great Dane Brugler, NFL draft analyst extraordinaire, now with The Athletic. He is the best in the business, and I guarantee you by the end of the show, once again, he will prove that. Dane, how goes it?
Good morning, Dan. It's almost the end of January, which is crazy. I mean, we're on the coming up with the All-Star game season with East-West Shrine, Senior Bowl, then the Combine will be here before we know it, and workouts, pro days, and then it'll be draft weekend. So we got a lot to cover over the next few months. It'll be fun to see how things fluctuate. It's an interesting draft class. And obviously the intrigue starts with the quarterbacks, and Stroud's right there at the top now.
Dane has 4 children, and he has let his wife and kids know he will not see them until the day after the draft.
Yep.
So let's start at the top. We are just going to go through the draft-eligible Buckeyes. I'm going to try and keep them in order. Dane has done a mock draft that was premium for The Athletic. And as we go through this, he will let you know where he thinks the guys might go and what he's hearing. And the information is coming fast and furious. Obviously, he's already alluded to it. C.J. Stroud at the top. Very interesting last couple months for C.J. in that I feel like, his Q rating was lower than maybe it should have been. Then he put forth, clearly the best all-around performance of his career in the playoff, especially given the opponent. And now he's in the mix with several other quarterbacks. I will say this, very interesting draft in that Bryce Young of Alabama and Will Levis of Kentucky, I believe, are the other 2 quarterback prospects in contention for the top spot. You could not get 3 more different quarterbacks, physical types, anything into one room at one time. So this is really beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
100%. That's exactly right. Go from team to team. You might have a different quarterback number 1 in this class. You might have a different order, 1, 2, 3, and I'd even put 4 in there with Anthony Richardson, who is as toolsy as you could possibly want, just really, really raw as a quarterback. So, it's going to be interesting how each team stacks these quarterbacks. And the interview process will be a big part of this. Once coaches get involved, that'll be a big part of this. And we have several teams in the top 10 that we know need a quarterback. Starting with the Texans at number 2, the Colts at number 4, the Seahawks are a possibility depending on how they feel about Geno Smith. You've got the Panthers there at 9, the Raiders at 7, and a couple other teams just outside the top 10 who could potentially make a move to go up and get one. So it will be very interesting, these quarterback musical chairs in the top 10, and CJ's right there in the mix. I mean, you said it with the Peach Bowl performance against Georgia, saved his best for last. Just for him to go out there and play as well as he did, even though it was a loss, play as well as he did on that stage against probably one of the better defenses he has ever faced in his life. It was a lot of fun to watch, and even watching the tape the next day, just really, really impressive. And my biggest issue with Stroud leading up into that game was the fact that he's a really, really good passer from the pocket. He can carve you up, very accurate, but it's in the NFL, you have to be not just a passer, you have to be a creator. And he wasn't consistently a creator over his time at Ohio State. Well, you throw in that Georgia tape, and that makes you, maybe he could do this. And look, you could, tell me, we could talk about that long run he had against Northwestern. Go back to his redshirt year when he had that long run against Michigan State. It's never that he was a bad athlete, but there's a big difference between being comfortable and as a scrambler. And, there's so many zone reads where he's not even thinking about running. The defense isn't respecting his legs at all. And, having all this time to prepare for Georgia, if he just took a different mindset towards using his legs, because that was the big difference between what he did in that game compared to his previous 2 years at Ohio State. So and that, it's true in the numbers. It's not just the tape. His first 27 games with the Buckeyes, he had 1 missed tackle. 1. Against Georgia, he had 3. I mean, it's just, so how do you take this one game and weight it against this, the body of work that he put on tape the majority of his career. Does this mean that he's going to be comfortable moving forward with this, being more of a dual threat and taking the yardage if it's there, moving around in the pocket to make that first man miss? If all of a sudden that's going to be part of his game, that changes the evaluation a little bit. And so it's going to be a really interesting thing to see these teams as they stack these quarterbacks. Bryce Young, to me, is the best just quarterback in this draft, but he's a complete outlier size-wise. I mean, he's going to be 5'10" and change, 190 pounds, and we've never seen a quarterback like that go in the first round. Especially this modern era, the last 20, 25 years, it's very, very rare. So not every team's going to be on board with Bryce Young, especially in the top 5, top 10 picks. And then Will Levis has every physical trait that you could possibly want, but his accuracy is hit and miss. He's, just needs to see things a little bit quicker. But Will Levis is really well liked because of, once our coaches get our hands on him, just wait. And so there's a lot of thought with him. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I do think it'll be surprising if CJ Stroud does not end up in the top 10 somewhere to a team like the Panthers, the Raiders, the Colts, one of those teams.
How much do you think the NFL evaluators use the current situations when they make these evaluations? Because as I look at it, there's some real, you can't ever do apples to apples comparisons with individuals because everyone's their own prospect. But we just went through this with Tua and Justin Herbert. And I don't care what anyone tells me. I don't remember hearing very many people, and I'm a draft nerd. I don't remember hearing very many people saying they would have taken Herbert over Tua. I guess there were a few, but I don't remember anyone like making that their, piece to stand on. And clearly now, if you were to do it, Herbert would be picked, well before Tua. And I get what everyone's saying about Bryce Young, but I had a physical yesterday. I'm 5'10", 195. Okay. Not to say that my NFL career is done, Dane. You don't have to swap me for this draft, thankfully.
Yeah.
But that's just not, CJ is also like kind of a late bloomer. He was a late bloomer in high school. If you look at him physically, he hasn't. I don't know if CJ has gotten his old man strength yet. Like, I'm going to get a graphic, but guys' butts get big and they just thicken out when you get about 23, 24 years old. To me, when CJ hits that stretch, he's going to be physically kind of your ideal quarterback. He's going to be 6'3", 220 pounds. You know what I mean? And he is as accurate as you can get. There's no doubt about that. So here's my question. I think if people, not you, but most people I've seen with the emergence of Justin Fields is that I'm not sure how many people really pay close attention to college football and pro football. Because I think if you ask the average NFL fan, they would think Justin Fields ran the option at Ohio State. Okay. He was not a runner at Ohio State. They had games at whole games where he didn't have a design run, entire game plans. So things change. You know what I'm saying? You got to do what you got to do. And quarterback, I'm so confident of this, and you know this more than anyone, is such a dependent position for most guys on where you go. Dwayne Haskins, God rest his soul, went to the worst possible situation for him on planet Earth. Okay, coming from the most structured environment ever to the least structured, So to me, it's so much where they go. Except for obviously the Joe Burrows of the world who can go anywhere and have that special moxie. I'll help you to give them 3 all-pro wide receivers, but I digress. So how much of that is beauty in the eye of the beholder? Like Will Levis, there's no earth on which I could see someone picking Will Levis over CJ Stroud. But then what am I looking at then?
Well, because, I think we look at projection and, with CJ, again, it goes back to what he put on that Georgia tape. Is that the new CJ Stroud? Or, is that just, is that a one-time thing? It's the fact that if you did it once, I know you could do it. But can you do it consistently? And are you comfortable doing it consistently? Because, I think that, each player is different. And with Fields, and even going back to high school with CJ Stroud, he's never been a runner. He's always been a pocket passer, a guy that does not want to run the ball. Can he just be a little more creative with his legs? Because in the NFL, 60% of the time, the play does not go as planned. You have to move your feet. You have to, come off your read and extend the play and buy time and, go off schedule. And so can you do that at a high level and be comfortable doing it? That's where the projection is with CJ Stroud. Yes, he did it against Georgia. And I mean, that's why he's my number 2 quarterback behind Bryce Young over Will Levis. But I think some teams will look at it and say, you know what, we're just not confident that he's able to do it. And so that's why, they might opt for Levis over Stroud. That's what I had in my mock draft. And again, that's not what I would do, but I would not be surprised at all if that's how teams feel. But it's, I agree with you what you said about from the pocket. He is so accurate. His reads pre and post snap are outstanding. He can carve you up. We will, something that is tough with quarterback evaluation is removing them from the situation. And okay, let's just say you switch CJ Stroud and Will Levis. How do those two situations play out? Because Kentucky, that offense, how many, players on a Kentucky offense are starting at Ohio State? Probably 0. The play caller, they had a brand new play caller this year, already fired. It's just not even, the offense was a train wreck. And so when you start doing this and when you try to stack these quarterbacks and compare and contrast, that these are the exercises that you do in your head. And it's really tough to figure out because of just, there's so many variables involved. And so, and that's what quarterback remains and will always be the toughest position to evaluate. Because each team, each quarterback is asked to do something differently. They have different talent around them. They face different levels of competition, and college is just a very different game than the NFL. So that's why NFL teams, they draft traits, and CJ Stroud has very good traits, but so does Will Levis, and so that's where we're going to get differing opinions on the order of these quarterbacks.
I just find it interesting that people pick and choose when they want to apply that stuff. Like, Tua's receivers were as good as any receivers ever. And I hear people saying, oh, who did CJ Stroud throw to? His receivers in the NFL aren't going to be as good as his college receivers.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. And that's that quarterback. It's a very, people want to put, analytics with them. And I do think there are some metrics that help, explain quarterback prospects and how that will translate. But it's a very intangible based position. And so much of it is the mentality. And that's why another reason that I think CJ helped himself against Georgia was not just the movements and to be able to create. It was the poise that he showed. It was the fact that they were in it until the end. And, if they don't lose Marvin Harrison, they probably win that game. So, it was, a lot of the mental fortitude that you wanted to see from a quarterback on a stage like that against an opponent like that. So that's something that will really help Stroud as well. And I do really like CJ Stroud. I love Bryce Young, and he might not last in the NFL because of that size. It's a very realistic possibility. I'm going to bet on the guy that I think is just a better quarterback, and we'll find out how the size holds up. But yeah, CJ Stroud, there's no reason why he shouldn't be a long-term starter in the NFL.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to watch. I do think that Tua's concussion issues could end up hurting Bryce Young, but who knows? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and like you said, it's only one team that has to pick him. So, Speaking of beauty being in the eye of the beholder, I don't think he'll be the next player picked for Ohio State, but I think the next most interesting discussion is that of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I went back and looked, Dane. You had Jaxon Smith-Njigba rated 17th before the season. So you are free of persecution from me. Most guys are now dropping him into the mid to late 20s behind receivers that I know for a fact that he is better than. Unless you think the soft tissue hamstring injury is lingering, it's been proven to us that a year off is not detrimental to these guys. The pandemic year showed us that, if anything, the Jamar Chases and the Micah Parsons of the world seem to be doing just fine. What do you make of this? I'm not sure you're high on as high on Jaxon as I was in the first place. What do you make of where he will end up? Most people have him in the 20s right now, as I see. And I think it's realistic to think he would have been top 15 had he not gotten hurt. So maybe take us through what you think of him as a player, how you judge a season-ending injury like that, how you judge the fact that the guys came before him and after him are so good, context, etc.
Yeah, and I really like Jaxon Smith-Njigba. But is he on the same level as Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave as prospects? No, I don't think so. And that's not to say that you can say those two things together, that you really like him, think he's a good player, just not on the same level as those two guys. Because both those guys, I think they both hit 1,000 yards as
First
rookies.
time ever.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it's a rare thing. And and people say, oh, well, he had more production. That means not. That doesn't mean a lot. That he had more production than those two guys. Teams don't draft production. That's not what translates. Production doesn't translate to the NFL. Traits translate. And while I do really like Smith-Njigba, I've also seen linebackers catch up to him and chase him down. I've seen, working from the slot, getting a lot of favorable looks against safeties and linebackers, and just being able to destroy coverage over the middle of the field. Especially with so much attention being paid to Olave and Wilson. So this is going to be a big year for Smith-Njigba I don't know. I mean, I'm still guessing he would have been primarily a slot receiver, but maybe would have seen him a little bit more on the outside. And, we still would have had Marvin Harrison and Ibuka, drawing coverage. So I don't know how much we would have learned from that. He's going to be playing with big time receivers no matter what. But he's still a really good player because he's a crafty route runner and he's got really good ball skills. You have those two things, you're going to play in the NFL for a long time. So it's just a matter of, because, okay, so for example, let's take TCU's Quentin Johnston. TCU's Quentin Johnston and Smith-Njigba will be ranked together as wide receivers in this class. They're two completely different guys with what they're asked to do. Smith-Njigba is a slot receiver. Quentin Johnston's an outside guy that's 6'4", 215, can win vertically. So even though they're going to be stacked and, they're going to be in the same mock draft, they play almost two very different positions. And so it's hard to really look at those two guys and comparing them apples to apples. So now Jordan Addison's a little, from USC, he's a little bit different because I think he can do inside outside, but maybe another guy that you like better inside. But Smith-Njigba, I think that it's easy to forget how good he was last year. I will say that not every team is super high on him. Some teams have 3rd round grades on him. Just because they don't value, they almost view running or slot receiver as running back, where
I gotta call timeout on that. That's borderline insulting to Brian Hartline. I'm telling you, Dane.
Yeah, that's the truth. But again, it's because they view slot receiver as like a running back, where we feel like we can draft or find a slot receiver later on, not as good as Smith-Njigba, but someone that could fill that role. And so he's just not going to be highly ranked for every team. And so, and that's, again, not what I think, but just, sharing the message there. The injury with what he did last year with that supporting cast, it does complicate things somewhat. But I think it's also a wide receiver class that is viewed as not top heavy. It's not like last year. We had 6 go in the top 23 picks or something like that. We might have 2 or 3 receivers go first round this year. None of them are locks. I would not call any of these receivers just a lock for the first round. And I think there's a very good chance Jordan Addison goes, very good chance Smith-Njigba goes, Quentin Johnston too, but I wouldn't call any of them locks. Because a lot of teams look at the value as being in the 2nd round, 3rd round this year at getting a wide receiver and say, oh, we'll get our corner in the 1st, or we'll get our tackle. So it'll be a really interesting thing to track throughout the process. If that changes at all, how teams view it. It's not a great wide receiver class in free agency. Will that change how teams think? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation with Smith-Njigba.
When you talk about his speed, do you have a particular play in mind when he got caught?
The Penn State game last year, maybe it's Brandon Smith. It was a good, speedy linebacker. He tracked him down. There was another one.
I know which one you're thinking of. Is it the Nebraska one where he scores the touchdown? He gets hit in the end zone.
That might have been it. I have to look back
Okay.
at my notes. Yeah.
That I wrote down and I followed. That's JoJo Doman.
Yeah. Who's
Okay.
basically a safety. Yeah.
Who starts in the NFL?
Yeah. He's basically a nickel player for Nebraska. I mean, and
But I'm saying, and the other guy that tracked him down in that game also starts in the NFL as a
yeah.
rookie, 57, whatever his name was. I can't remember.
And I'm not saying he's going to go out there and run a 4.7, but if he goes out and runs, say, a 4.56, that's something that could, potentially hurt him in terms of going as early as some think he should go. It's a stopwatch position. That the 40-yard dash will matter for teams and the wide receiver position. So now, I think that he is so good as a route runner that I'm perfectly okay with him running a 4.5 and still drafting him, somewhere in the first round. But it's not every team's going to feel that way.
Very interesting, also because you got an interview with the three, Garrett and Chris and Jaxon sitting there, and I know it's just another player giving praise, but Garrett even says out loud, "I thought I was the best receiver I'd ever seen until I saw Jaxon." And then both those guys go in the league and get 1,000 yards. So he may not be what everyone thinks, but he's going to be, man. I'll tell you this. When the ball goes in the air and it's thrown to one of your players, you get this feeling in your heart, whether they're going to catch it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Smith-Njigba may be number one on my list where I'm like, he's going to catch it.
Yeah.
It used to be Garrett Wilson, but I think Smith-Njigba I was more confident. Anyway, we digressed. That was a lot on those two.
Yeah.
Let's get to a guy I think is going to rise. And whatever the apex of where he may be picked is going to happen once they do interviews and do the research, and that is Paris Johnson Jr. To me, I would hire him to work for Bucknuts tomorrow. I'm serious. This is as well-rounded an individual human being as
he's got a journalism degree, right?
Almost intimidating to me that someone this age could be this mature and just focused on life, whereas at that age I was an absolute mess. So I don't see I don't even remember Paris Johnson Jr. really playing this year. I'll be honest with you. I don't really remember it. I can't really tell you a play where he got beat that cleanly that it bothered me.
There's just one play.
Great player.
It really just that one play against Georgia. That was like the only one the entire year.
Now the rookie got him.
Yeah, the freshman. It was just like, but that
guy's a pro.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, he's going to be a stud. But I mean, it's as a tackle, that's what you want. You want to be the unknown. You don't want attention on you. You just want to go out there and do your job, and that's what Paris Johnson did consistently. I mean, he's not a perfect player by any means. His issues, they're all fixable. It's all inexperience based and not based on ability. So he's a natural left tackle. It was good to see him go back to that position this year and kind of just like riding a bike, just looked really natural there. Yep. So I think that his hands, they'll get wide at times. Needs to just trust his technique. Sometimes he'll revert to some bad habits and just abandon those fundamentals instead of just focusing on what he's been coached to do. So it's just a matter of repetition. He'll get there. But again, the fluidity for a big man like that, the mobility, he's such a gifted player, gifted athlete. And he's still, getting better and better. You mentioned the mentality, the way he processes things. I think he's going to be a really good pro, and he's right there in the mix to be the first. If I had to make a bet on it today, I would say he will be the first offensive lineman drafted.
No, absolutely. What Dane's referring to is, I believe, the competition is with Peter Skoronski of Northwestern. And I'm sorry, there is no way someone's going to take – no way is a stretch. I don't think someone will take a player with measurables that are clearly not desirable in the first pick. When there's a guy – there's no risk factor in Paris Johnson. I'm not saying he's going to be a 10-time All-Pro, but he's a borderline guarantee without injury that he's going to be a starting left tackle for a decade. Yeah. I don't know if you can say that about Skoronski. We've seen guys – the last guy picked like Skoronski was Brandon Scherf.
Right. Well, and I think if you think that Peter Skoronski as Zach Martin, then I think, that's the only scenario I see where you're taking him over Paris Johnson, because Skoronski is awesome. I mean,
I love
think
Zach Martin now.
Yeah, but I think that his best ceiling in the NFL is going to be inside a guard, and so if you feel like he has that type of trajectory, then you'll take him top 10, plug him in at guard, and feel great about that. But if you're looking specifically for a left tackle, it'd be hard to pass on Paris Johnson.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. All right, let's go here. Next up, our fourth prospect. Interesting. Do you think it will be, and you take who? Let's just go two in a row here. I'll give you a choice. You do one or the other and then follow it up. Defensive end, Zach Harrison. Right tackle, DeJuan Jones.
Well, it's interesting that you put these two guys together, because they're both tough guys to really figure out, because they have, clear physical traits that set them apart. Zach Harrison, with as long as he is, as the speed is ridiculous. He's not a guy that is, he's unrefined as a pass rusher. He's leggy. He's not going to bend the edge, but that length, it just that helps him get home and disrupt the pocket. I see him as a player that's going to be in the NFL for a long time. Probably never makes a Pro Bowl, anything like that, but you want him part of your rotation, both on the edge and then on the inside. He gives you something, and I don't think he's done. Something interesting with both these guys, I think they're both seniors, but I think they're both August birthdays. So they're, like 21 years old. Yeah, young and still growing and learning. DeJuan Jones, he's a complete outlier in terms of the size, how big he is, but still being able to move. I mean, he is not a slug with the way he moves. And so now, can he hold up against Von Miller in space? That's going to be tough, going up against some of the speed rushers that the NFL has. But he's so wide that he does make it difficult on them, even if he is a little bit late to redirect and stay balanced. So both these guys are complicated prospects. They will be loved by some, not loved, but liked a lot by some teams, and then just not even really considered by others, because some of the things about their profile worries them. But I think both are going to go on day two, and both have a chance to be starters in this league.
So day two, for those who haven't kept up to speed, Thursday night's your first round. Then day two is second and third round. Mm-hmm. So essentially, you're talking about the top 100. Right. And it seems to me like that's become a distinction for you. It's like first 2 days, top 100, and then everybody else. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, I'll tell you what about Harrison. And you know this because of your Ohio ties, he is going to obliterate the combine. Like, there's going to be a segment on NFL Network where they come back from commercial and you have Harrison running that which, by the way, I could watch for 3 hours and pick out different guys to run the 40 against each other from history. Yeah. He's going to outrun everybody. Yeah, I mean,
at 265, he's going to be.
He's a track star. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He also knows how to run, and knowing how to run the 40 is probably good for getting you under 4.5 just on technique. So, and he literally looks like a Marvel character. You know what I'm saying? He literally does. He's got like the tiny waist. And so do you think it's possible that someone could go gaga and just absolutely, and we start with like the 19th pick? You know what I'm saying? Something bizarre like that.
I mean, nothing surprises me in the draft, really. I mean, with a guy that is going to be 265 pounds, run somewhere, the over-under on his 40 might be like a 4.53, which is,
I think he's going sub 4.5.
Yeah, and it's just ridiculous that we're even talking about that. But you factor in the length, and also that he got better as a senior. Being a 5-star, obviously you're put under a microscope and you're just critiqued from as a freshman. And the moment you get out there, and he's been beat up pretty good the last 4 years as maybe not living up to being that 5-star guy. But I thought you saw him get better each year, and he again having those long arms, 36-inch and that's why length matters. Some of those fumbles forced that he had. If his arms are just 34 inches, he's not creating those fumbles, and that just changes things and changes how you block him and what you're doing with your protection. So yeah, nothing would surprise me, but I think there's a better chance he goes on day 2. But sure, with those traits, if a coach says, just get him on my team, we'll figure it out. I don't think the first round's impossible.
Yeah, I'm not saying I think it will happen.
Sure.
But if you were looking in history at guys that does happen to,
Mm-hmm.
Harrison would fit into that mold completely because you've heard Dane say about traits. There are no better traits than a 6'6", 265 guy running sub 4.5. How many people on the earth are like that? Literally a handful. There's a kid named Nicholas Harbor who's being recruited right now, who's a track star out of DC who looks just the same. And there are colleges camping out in front of his house. So let's move on. Perhaps the most interesting decision to draft nerds, of course, like me, Luke Whippler, center. Believe it or not, center is an Ohio State calling card now.
Yeah.
Two of the better ones out there, guys getting paid, guys who last in the NFL. Of course, we're talking about Corey Linsley and Josh Myers, the latest. Smart guys. Whippler was a true center. He came here to play center. He's got that New Jersey personality, very much a leader and a take charge type. That said, surprising he left a little bit. He's good enough, but he probably would have had a chance to be maybe a day 2 guy had he come back next year. I don't think he will be now. Give us what you think on Luke Whippler, his decision, and where you think he might end up.
Yeah, and I was surprised too. I don't think he's like a top 100 type of guy. He's more of a day 3 player. Maybe throughout the process he can get into the 4th, 5th round. But he's a guy that plays tall. So his center of gravity is a little bit off. Can be knocked off balance. Even in space, I wish he was more controlled. So he's a solid player, draftable. But no, I mean, I don't think that he's. So my positional rankings, my top 15 at each position came out today on The Athletic, and I grouped guard and center together, interior offensive line, and he came in at number 10 among that group. So he's a guy that has next level ability, but you don't look at his tape and say, oh, that's a definite NFL starter. So a little surprised he came out, but we'll see how he does throughout the process and if he can help himself.
How about Ronnie Hickman? Ronnie was a guy who declared early. Mm-hmm. He played a lot of football at Ohio State. If anything, he's kind of a hybrid-y, he's almost a triple combination of a corner and a safety and a linebacker. He played kind of the, it depends on where you went to high school. We called it the Falcon. Some people call it the Bandit. You've seen it called the Joker in some other spots, or the Animal. It's kind of that hybrid safety spot. Mm-hmm. Do you think he's a safety in the NFL? Is he a hybrid player? Is he a special teamer? I don't think he's fast enough to play corner.
Yeah, no, but he's fast. I mean, especially as a safety, I think that, with him, there was just so many almost plays on his tape. There was a play on the Georgia that's flashing in my mind where it should have been a pick 6. Should have been. It was close. But he's very conservative, too conservative, where, he doesn't have, you look at how PFF grades him, or, you see him, how there's talked about a telecast, and, he doesn't give up a lot of catches. He doesn't have a lot of missed tackles. It's because he plays so conservative. And so you also look at the, interception numbers or the pass defended numbers. He doesn't have a lot of those big plays because he doesn't try to, it's not he doesn't go after them very much. And so I want to see him react a half second sooner, take more chances. And I think that even though that might mean giving up a play or two, he's still going to make more plays. But I think this is a guy that he takes good angles in the run game, finds that quickest route from A to B. He's a really solid tackler, gets low, wide base, wraps, finishes. Doesn't have, I think, ideal bulk on his frame, but he has a good frame. So he's going to continue to get bigger. He's a good athlete in space, pedal, redirect, drive. So there's a lot about him that I like. Just the mentality, I think, and maybe that was coached into him where they wanted him to be a conservative player and, kind of just, bend but don't break with that mentality. I don't know. But I'm eager to see him at the Senior Bowl. Just see him out there moving in space, turn, run, see how he holds up in coverage. So that'll be a big week for them down there in Mobile.
All right, people. For you real Bucknutters, this is going to be some fun here. We're going to do Dane Brugler trivia on Dane Brugler.
Oh, gosh.
We've been fortunate that Dane's been on the show several years in a row. He just gave an evaluation of Ronnie Hickman that was virtually identical to an evaluation he gave on a Buckeye of the last 5 or 6 years, maybe 5 years. And I would like Dane to guess his own evaluation. Who was it?
Okay, let's see. Ohio State safeties, not Malik Hooker, obviously. Oh man, I'm blanking. Who are the Ohio State safeties the last 5-6 years?
You said about this player that you wish he had done more. He didn't fire off quite as much. He was in position and didn't make the plays. And
Jordan Fuller?
Jordan Fuller.
Yeah, okay.
How did Jordan Fuller do in the NFL?
Yeah.
He was the captain of the St. Louis. Good God. I'm an old
It used to be.
The LA team.
Yeah.
Very similar player, by the way. And so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because literally, I'm telling you, I couldn't do the video, but you could cut and paste the name Fuller and Hickman into your evaluation there.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're just looking at precedence and the fact that I just stumped Dane on his own material is going to be the high point of this show. Believe me, that's going to bother him, people.
Hey, no,
it will.
I do like Hickman. I mean, I graded him. I think he's right now he's at my number 5 safety in my rankings, 5 or 6.
Where does that land you draft wise?
Borderline top 100. You know, like it maybe sneaks into the top 100, but yeah, late 3rd, early 4th. So, and that's to start the process. We'll see how he does at the Senior Bowl. How he does at the combine, things like that. If that maybe switches or changes things a little bit, but where we're starting is a pretty good place to start.
All right, the rest of the guys, I have down Cam Brown, Teron Vincent, Tanner McAllister. Do you see any more guarantees a stretch, but guys you really think will be on an NFL roster?
I think Cam Brown has a shot. This season, obviously, I did not go how he planned. I think he struggles to play through contact too much. He'll track the ball, but then he's inconsistent making plays on the ball. He needs to be a better tackler. I mean, most of my notes are not great with Cam Brown, but if he goes out there and runs well, which he probably will, he's got a chance to get drafted, and we'll see what he could do in training camp. McAllister, he had a nice season coming over from Oklahoma State, but I don't think there's enough there for him to get drafted. But maybe he'll prove me wrong there. Both the defensive tackles, they had their flashes, but I just don't know if they did enough to guarantee that they're going to get drafted. I think both are borderline draft picks. Vincent, he'll have these moments where he shoots a gap, but then he's too easily moved in the run game. So it's just a matter of, what are you exactly are you looking for from your defensive tackle, and later in the draft, how many options do you have? And so I think those guys are borderline draftable.
Vincent's going to get a chance given the fact that his dad has the position he has. You know what I mean? There's 100% chance he's getting the benefit of the doubt somewhere.
Right.
You can take that to the bank. All right. We are a little bit ahead of the game here, but it's Ohio State, so I know Dane has some knowledge on this. When you look at next year and you look at the Buckeyes that are on there, it's going to be very interesting. A couple of years ago, they started a freshman quarterback and a freshman tailback and C.J. Stroud and Trayvon Henderson, but with super veteran receivers. And they're going to do the same again this year. They're going to start a quarterback who's never started before, but you're going to give him 2 first-round wide receivers, in my opinion. You can discuss that if you don't think so in Emeka Egbuka. I think Marvin Harrison, I can't think of any receiver I've seen in college football that going into his final year of college was thought of higher. I could be wrong, but Randy Moss had some off-the-field stuff, and Marvin has 0 of that. He is a fine human being. And then you've got some other guys on there that are very, very interesting, but you got a tight end and Cade Stover who's coming back. Julian Fleming hasn't announced yet, and we expect him to probably be back. So very interesting for next year Then you've also got guys like JT Tuimoloau who will come out, hopefully. Will play well enough for that and go from there. Obviously, you can start with Marvin, but just a general sense of the Buckeyes, knowing that you have a keen eye on this. Keep in mind, people, Dane Brugler is a Warren, Ohio native who was living in the fine state of Texas, but when it came time to raise his children, he knew where they needed to be. So go, Dane.
I mean, it's funny going back to September and when I tweeted that Marvin Harrison would be the easy wide receiver 1 in this class. And the responses are just, oh, he's not even wide receiver 1 on his own team and no way. And I'm just, come on, guys, like this guy is special. And then as the season went on, more and more people, okay, yeah, you're right. This guy's just different. Marvin Harrison, he would be the easy wide receiver 1 in this draft class, be a top 5 pick. Hopefully he just stays healthy next year.
Yep.
That's just with the new quarterback, not sure what the production's going to look like, but he is a special player who I'm sure we'll pick apart and, it will go through all that, but we'll save it for next year. When I watched Buka, I haven't studied him yet, but when I watched him, I didn't necessarily, see a first round player, but I saw a good player, a guy who's going to be a pro and, he's just a reliable dude. So, I'm eager to study him this summer. Tommy Eichenberg surprised me coming back a little bit. I thought he might test the waters. If he came out, I think he would have been a top 100 pick. He's just a really good run defender, run blitzer. The key read flow skills are outstanding.
Consistent.
Just a really a consistent guy and coverage. That's one area where he needs to get better. And so glad he did go back because I think he could be even higher next year. We'll see what they do on the offensive line with, at the tackle spots and at center. That's going to be really interesting. I like that left guard who's it?
Donovan Jackson.
Yeah, I liked him. I think
he's all American. He's a I'm not saying first round pick, but in terms of career interior guy, he's one of the better ones they've had.
I'm really eager to see what he looks like next year because I think he has a chance to be a really good player.
Yep.
Kate Stover, I think that an injury, kind of he was on the fence about coming out, and I think that injury kind of decided it for him. But he's a guy that if just some of those plays at the catch point he finishes, I think he has a chance to cement himself as a day 2 pick.
Yeah, Stover's a guy when I watch the NFL, he might be a better fit in the NFL than he actually is in college. He's kind of your jack of all trades guy. And here's the thing about Eichenberg and Stover, and you know this. When you ask that question about who ends up in the locker room if there's a free for all, the roommates are walking out together, I've been told.
Yeah.
God knows I wouldn't want to be in there.
Yeah.
I've been taking some
I believe it. I believe it.
So give us an idea of how you see the process from now until the draft. Everyone goes, just for the general people, you got your visits, and how do you do your rankings? So when are your bench post marks here going forward up until the day?
Well, most of the hay is in the barn at this point in the process because the college football season's over. Now I still have more tape to watch. I can't get through all the tape that I want to on each player at this point. So I'm still watching tape on these players, and that'll make the rankings fluctuate a little bit. But then being able to see these guys up close and personal and talk to them at the Senior Bowl and Combine, that does change things a little bit. It's not necessarily, this guy ran a fast 40, let's bump him up. It's more talking to him and then talking to other people in Indianapolis. Because I'm one guy, I'm not a scouting department. And so, some of these guys, it's just a matter of needing every day throughout the process to learn as much as possible about them. And that will change things. So it's going to be another interesting draft class. Ohio State's got a lot of dudes. They're going to be one of the most well-represented teams, college teams this year in terms of draft picks, just like they are almost every year. So no surprise there. It'll be interesting to see how many Buckeyes end up in the first round. I think, CJ Stroud, Paris Johnson, good bets to go very high in the first round. But then, Smith-Njigba, is he able to sneak in there? You mentioned Zach Harrison. You never know. Can't rule it out. So it'll be interesting to see how high some of these Buckeyes end up going.
Couple things. One, if Jaxon Smith-Njigba gets past pick number 26, you will see me on a ledge out where there'll be cameras.
Cowboys pick 26.
Fire engines with the big thing for me to jump in because I will be on the ledge and just furious beyond words. You can research who picks 26. Finally, Dane, I'm legally obligated to ask you who will win the NFC and AFC championship game and then win the Super Bowl.
I mean, it's hard to bet against Joe, and the way he's been playing, the fact that Patrick Mahomes is not 100%. I'm going to go with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And then Jalen Hurts, I'm not betting against him. The guy just continues to go out there and produce. He's locked in. I think we're going to see a Bengals-Eagles Super Bowl.
And?
Oh, I got to pick that one, huh? I'll give the edge to the Ohio team, the team that was there last year. So they've got the experience, and they're locked in. Get it done this year.
That would be incredible, and Joe Burrow's legend would only increase. I had a discussion about this the other day on the board. Someone said Joe Burrow is not a legend, and I said, ask someone from LSU what they think of him. And ask someone from the Bengals what they think of him. I think you can make an argument that he's the greatest player at LSU, and he's the greatest player ever to play for the Bengals already. I know that's hyperbole, but that's what we do here. Yeah. The great Dane Brugler, ladies and gentlemen, he will be back before the draft. I say that out loud so that makes him commit. And we appreciate everybody stopping by. Have a good one, Bucknutters.